The Mafia boss shatters worlds. But pick on innocent girl hiding at the Christmas carol. Grooms her back to life. Ramirez Tiffany sat in the candlelit Fourth Presbyterian Church, his broad frame tight inside his charcoal suit, tattoos rising along his neck as he watched every movement around him. He wasn't there for comfort. He was there because something in him refused to stay still, even on Christmas Eve. His focus stopped when he saw her. Felicia Hernandez sat alone in a corner pew, curled inside a thin coat that barely protected her from the cold. Her tired eyes stayed low, as if she was trying to disappear into the wood. She looked like someone who had been running for too long with no place left to go. For the first time in years, Ramirez felt a pull he couldn't explain, a protective urge breaking through the walls he had built around himself. The service ended, people whispering and filing out, but Felicia rushed for the exit as if the air inside was too heavy to breathe. Ramirez followed her into the freezing Chicago night, snow falling hard around them. Near the Douzible Bridge, her steps slowed. Then she collapsed onto the ice-covered sidewalk. Ramirez didn't hesitate. Saving her became the only choice his heart allowed. Thank you, truly. Thank you for spending these moments with me. Every time you watch, every time you listen, every time you allow these characters to touch your heart, you give life to this channel. Your support is the reason these stories continue to breathe. We're on a journey together, one built on love, heartbreak, healing, and resilience. And now, we're reaching for a new milestone, 10,000 subscribers. It's a big dream, but it's a dream we can reach together. If you've been enjoying these stories, if you've ever felt seen, moved, comforted, or inspired by them, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. Your subscription isn't just a number, it's a message that these stories matter, that this little storytelling family is growing, and that we're building something beautiful here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. And thank you for being part of this journey. Let's reach 10,000, side by side. Ramirez reached her before the cold could steal more of her strength. Felicia lay curled on the frozen sidewalk, her breath shallow, snow gathering in her hair. He crouched beside her, his large frame blocking the wind. His voice came out low and careful, nothing like the harsh tone people expected from a man like him. Stay with me. You're safe right now, he said. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharp with fear. She tried to pull away from him, but her body barely responded. Still, she fought, pushing at his chest with trembling hands. Don't touch me, she whispered. Please, I don't know you. He didn't move back. He only eased his hands into view so she could see he wasn't forcing anything. His voice stayed steady, almost gentle. I'm trying to help you. You collapsed. You won't make it through the night out here. Felicia's distrust was immediate. Why would you? Why would someone like you stop? What do you want? Her question held every scar she carried. She had the guarded tone of someone who had learned that kindness often came with demands, and that no one offered help without expecting something in return. Ramirez felt the weight of that fear hit deeper than he expected. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "One night. Just one. Get warm, get stable, and if you want to leave after that, you can. No strings." Her eyes flicked over him, the suit, the strength in his shoulders, the ink tracing up his neck. She wasn't naive. She could tell he wasn't an ordinary man. That alone made her hesitate. But the cold was eating through her coat, and her body was shutting down faster than she wanted to admit. She swallowed hard. "One night," she whispered. He nodded and slipped his coat around her before lifting her carefully. She didn't fight this time. She was too tired, too cold, too close to giving out completely. Her head rested weakly against his chest as he carried her to his car parked near the bridge. He placed her in the passenger seat, turned up the heat, and wrapped her in a blanket kept in the back. Even then, she watched him with caution, studying every movement, every breath. She didn't trust him. She barely trusted the world, but she was trapped between survival and fear, and survival won. The drive to his penthouse was silent at first. Street lights streaked across the windshield as they moved through downtown Chicago. Felicia sat stiffly, sitting close to the door, as if she might fling herself out at the first sign of danger. Her fingers gripped the blanket, knuckles white. Ramirez kept his eyes on the road, giving her space. But he could feel her observing him, as if memorizing details. She wasn't admiring anything, she was preparing. Planning. Mapping escape routes, analyzing the lock on the door, checking for any sign that he might try to trap her. He didn't blame her. He wondered what force inside him had made him stop tonight, when he had walked past thousands of problems he didn't fix. He had lived his life with strict rules. No surprises. No emotional risks. No strangers in his private world. Yet here he was, breaking every rule he had set for himself. At a red light, he glanced at her. Her eyes were half closed from exhaustion, but the worry beneath them hadn't faded. She noticed him looking, and her breath hitched in her throat. "You can rest," he told her. "I'll get you somewhere warm." "Where?" she asked softly. "Home," he answered. Her brows drew together at that word. Home sounded too big for someone who had none. They reached the Willis Tower private entrance, and the guard stepped aside with immediate recognition. Felicia tensed. She watched the interaction closely, noticing how the guard straightened with respect, how he addressed Ramirez with a tone that suggested power, maybe influence far deeper than she understood. The elevator ride to the penthouse was quiet. The doors opened to a large, warm space with floor-to-ceiling windows displaying the night skyline. The contrast was jarring, her worn coat, her unstable breathing, set against a place built for comfort and control. Felicia didn't step forward at first. She stood near the doorway, as if crossing the threshold would commit her to something she wasn't ready for. A soft shuffle echoed down the hall. Mrs. Chen, Ramirez's longtime housekeeper, appeared with a warm blanket over her arm. Her eyes widened when she saw Felicia, half frozen, shaking, lost, but she didn't ask questions. "Bring her in," Mrs. Chen said immediately, her voice brisk but warm. Felicia's tension eased only slightly at the sight of another woman. Mrs. Chen guided her gently to the couch, her hands steady and patient. Ramirez stood a step back, giving Felicia space, while also remaining close enough to intervene if she collapsed again. "I'll make tea," Mrs. Chen said. "She needs heat and food." Ramirez nodded but didn't hover. He pushed a door open to his study and stepped inside, letting the quiet surround him. He rested his hands on the desk, leaning forward, trying to make sense of the choice he had made. He didn't bring strangers here. He didn't involve himself in situations he couldn't control. His life ran on plans, structure, and careful distance from anything that might soften him. But Felicia, collapsing alone in the snow, her eyes full of exhaustion and fear, something inside him had cracked. He stayed in the study long enough for Mrs. Chen to help Felicia warm up. When he returned, Felicia was sitting on the couch wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked small, almost swallowed by the fabric, but more present than she had been on the bridge. Mrs. Chen set a bowl of hot soup in front of her. Felicia hesitated before eating, as if she couldn't believe the meal was meant for her. When she tasted the first spoonful, her eyelids fluttered with relief. This was her first real meal in weeks. Ramirez leaned against the doorway and watched her quietly. The sight hit him harder than he expected. Someone like her, someone educated, someone gentle, someone who once had a life, reduced to running through the city streets and freezing alone on a holiday night. After eating, Mrs. Chen guided her to the guest bathroom. Felicia's steps were slow, like a person unsure if she was allowed to exist in a place like this. The water started, and soon the quiet sound of a shower filled the hallway. That simple sound, warm water instead of cold air, felt like a small victory. For Felicia, it was her first real shower in weeks. Steam gathered behind the door as she washed away dirt, fear, exhaustion, and layers of street life she never should have experienced. Yet even in the warmth, she kept glancing at the locked door, making sure it stayed closed. When she finally stepped into the guest room wrapped in borrowed clothes, she looked different, still fragile, still scared, but human again. Ramirez stood near the hallway, hands in his pockets. "You can rest," he said. "No one will bother you." Felicia studied him, searching for hidden intentions. But all she saw was a tired man, who looked strangely unsure of himself. She nodded once and stepped into the room. For tonight, at least, she was safe. Morning light spilled across the penthouse kitchen, warm and bright in a way that softened the steel and glass around it. Felicia woke slowly, her body confused by the sensation of heat, a bed, and silence that wasn't dangerous. For a moment she lay still, unsure if she had dreamed everything, the collapse, the stranger with steady eyes, the space that felt too safe to be real. But when she pushed herself upright, she was still in the soft clothes Mrs. Chen had given her. The blanket still smelled faintly of lavender. Her legs were weak, but no longer numb. She listened, expecting shouting, footsteps, something sharp in the air, but all she heard was the quiet hum of the city far below. She was still here. She wasn't sure if that made her more or less afraid. When she stepped into the hallway, she found Ramirez already awake in the kitchen. He stood by the counter with a mug in his hand, the morning sun turning his dark hair copper. His suit jacket was gone, sleeves rolled up, revealing more tattoos along his arms, symbols she couldn't read, but sensed carried weight. He noticed her immediately, though he tried not to startle her. "You're awake. Mrs. Chen made breakfast. She'll be back later." Felicia hovered near the doorway, unsure if she was allowed to enter. He pulled out a chair in quiet invitation. "You can sit. Eat," he said. She moved slowly, crossing into the warm kitchen, as though each step tested the air. The table held eggs, toast, fruit, tea, all simple things, but to someone who had been skipping meals and searching trash bins, it looked unreal. When she picked up the fork, her hand shook. "You don't have to rush," he said gently. Felicia didn't answer. She focused on eating, grounding herself with each bite. Ramirez watched without hovering, giving her space while still keeping himself nearby, as if making sure nothing frightened her. Halfway through her meal, she lifted her eyes. Her voice was careful. "You weren't supposed to help me." "I know," he said. "But you were on the ground in the cold. I wasn't going to walk away." She studied him, as though trying to understand what kind of man talked like that and looked like him. The silence stretched until Felicia finally let out a thin, shaky breath. "I should explain why I'm like this." "You don't owe me anything," he replied. "I know," she whispered. "But I need to say it out loud. And you deserve to know why I'm scared of everything." He nodded, waiting. Felicia wrapped her arms around herself, pulling the blanket tighter. "I'm a graduate student. Or I was. University of Chicago. I study history. Nothing dramatic." She paused, grounding herself before her voice wavered again. "I was walking through Jackson Park after a late study session. I took the long route because I needed the air. I didn't think it was dangerous. I've walked there 100 times." Her throat tightened. "I reached Buckingham Fountain. That's when it happened." Ramirez's expression sharpened, but he didn't interrupt. "There were men," she continued. "3 of them. They dragged someone out of a black SUV. He was begging. They didn't care." She swallowed hard, reliving it. "They shot him. On the ground. Over nothing. Like it was routine." Her hands trembled, and she set the fork down before she dropped it. I froze. I thought they'd see me. But someone distracted them. Another car pulled up. I ran. I ran so hard my chest burned. She closed her eyes. But one of them saw me. I don't know how much. I just know he shouted to the others. Ramirez stayed silent, letting her speak at her pace. She continued, her voice raw. After that night, I couldn't go home. I couldn't go to the police. I kept moving. Sleeping outside. Changing clothes from donation bins. The city felt like it had eyes. Every time I heard footsteps, I thought it was them. Did you recognize any of the men? Ramirez asked quietly. Felicia nodded. They had a symbol on their jackets. A black wolf head with a red mark beneath it. I didn't know what it meant, but it scared me. Ramirez's jaw tightened. He knew that mark well. Kozlov. A crew with a reputation for removing problems permanently. If Felicia had seen something she shouldn't have, she was in very real danger. She noticed the shift in his expression. Her voice dropped. You know who they are? Yes. Are you like them? He met her eyes. Not hiding, not boasting, simply telling the truth she deserved. I work in the same world, he said. But not the same way. I don't run with Kozlov. I don't touch the things they touch, and I don't harm people who didn't choose the life. He paused. I keep order in my corner. They create chaos in theirs. Felicia felt her breath catch. Most people would lie, avoid admitting anything tied to that dark world. Ramirez didn't. She whispered, then why me? Why protect someone you don't know? He looked down at the coffee in his hands, as if searching for the right words. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd heard from him before. I've spent years breaking things. Breaking trust. Breaking men. Breaking myself in ways I can't undo. His fingers curled around the mug. Maybe I saw you on that floor and realized I'm tired. I'm tired of only destroying. Maybe helping you was the first thing that felt right in a long time. Felicia stared at him, stunned by how honest, how vulnerable he sounded. Softly, she asked, so this isn't pity? No, he said immediately. It's choice. Something in her chest loosened. A small shift, but a real one. She glanced toward the tall windows, watching the city move far below. I don't know where to go. I don't know if I can even survive out there alone anymore. You don't have to, he said. Not until the danger is gone. She looked back at him. You can handle them. Ramirez didn't brag. He didn't posture. He simply said, yes. Felicia believed him. She folded the edge of the blanket between her fingers, thinking, weighing her options, her fear, her hope. After a long moment, she nodded slowly. I'll stay, she whispered. For now. Ramirez exhaled softly, almost relieved. This wasn't trust, not fully, but it was the first fragile step toward it. Days settled into a quiet pattern, each one softer than the last. Felicia learned the rhythm of the penthouse, the way light moved across the living room in the mornings, the hush of the city before rush hour, the careful way Mrs. Chen arranged fresh fruit on the counter. The world felt safe enough to let her breathe. Ramirez kept his distance in ways that were respectful. He never crowded her. He offered choices and left space for her to refuse. She surprised herself by accepting small things: a walk at dawn, a cup of coffee in the sunlit kitchen, a request to join him for simple errands. Every yes felt like a victory she hadn't expected to win. They walked before the city fully woke. The air was crisp, the streets nearly empty, and Chicago's buildings stood like quiet witnesses. Ramirez led her through alleys and along river paths he knew well. He pointed out a shop where the owner always left a little something for the stray cats. He stopped at a bakery where the morning bread smelled like comfort. He showed her how the city opened itself slowly, revealing corners a busy day would hide. Felicia returned the lessons. She pointed out details he'd stopped looking for: the way light spilled across old brick, the curve of a park bench, a street musician's careful rhythm. Her voice grew steadier as she explained small histories she had learned at the university. Ramirez listened, at first with the curious interest of a man who liked to know things, then with a softer attention that suggested he valued what she offered. On an overcast afternoon, they went to the Art Institute. Felicia's eyes lit up in a way Ramirez hadn't seen before, an honest glow that had nothing to do with his power or money. She moved through rooms with the familiarity of someone who could read a painting like a book. She spoke of light and choice, of how an artist framed a scene to make a small life feel big. Standing before Hopper's work, she paused. Ramirez watched her study the figures in the diner, the way each person looked close yet separate, the quiet inside the glass-fronted building. She explained the moment, just before the painting felt complete. "They're in the same room and still alone," she said. "It's like being near people, but not letting anyone in." Ramirez nodded slowly. He understood that kind of distance. He had built walls to keep pain contained. Hearing her voice turn an image into truth made him feel less alone. The physical closeness came small at first. Their hands brushed while reaching for the same book. They sat close on the couch to watch a movie and each adjusted instinctively, keeping a respectful space. Fingers found one another in ordinary tasks, handing her a mug, steadying her as she tied a shoelace. Each touch was careful, tested, a question posed in silence. One evening, after a slow dinner, Felicia settled on the sofa and Ramirez sat beside her. The film's light flickered across their faces. Halfway through, she shivered and he moved his arm behind her shoulders, offering warmth without pressure. She leaned in and rested her head against his arm. It was a small act, almost casual, and yet it felt like a treaty. She did not flinch. He did not breathe too loudly. The quiet between them held no demand. He watched how she laughed at small things. He watched how she frowned at books with difficult passages. He watched the unsteady way she slept when the city sounded different at night. Each observation softened him, drew him toward decisions he had not expected to make. While life inside the penthouse grew gentler, Ramirez moved in the world outside with a different purpose. He arranged a meeting at the Palmer House Hilton. The room smelled of old wood and strong coffee. He met with men who answered to names that carried weight across the city. He had walked through rooms like that before, negotiating lines others dared not cross. The conversation was direct. Ramirez did not ask for permission so much as state terms. He listened while they spoke of territories, debts, and reputations. He spoke in calm phrases, measured and clear. When he mentioned Felicia, the tone in the room shifted. Names and ranks did not matter as much as the fact that he had made someone important to him. He made clear what he expected. His message was simple: anyone who harmed her would answer to him. There was no threat that lacked reason. He laid out what he knew: who had been at Buckingham Fountain that night, who had followed her through the weeks, the signs he had gathered. He did not brag. He showed facts. Men who moved in that world respected clarity. Ramirez's words were steel wrapped in quiet. He did not seek a fight, he offered one if it came to that. They tried to push back, to measure if his resolve matched his voice. He showed them he was not a man to bargain away a person's life for profit. He made it clear that touching her would cost more than any of them wanted. The room cooled. The men weighed their choices. When he left, the men at Palmer House knew the stakes. Ramirez had not promised bloodshed for its own sake. He had promised retribution for crossing a line he had drawn. That line protected something he had not planned to protect when his life had begun. After the meeting, Ramirez did not return immediately to the penthouse. He stayed on the streets, watched locations, verified movements. He spoke to contacts who moved in under-the-radar places. He traced who had been on the fountain that night and who had taken orders. He confirmed alliances and cleared the paths of rumor. It was work that required patience, observation, and a willingness to be unpopular in circles that preferred silence. Weeks passed with small adjustments. Felicia ventured out occasionally with Mrs. Chen, or walked in daylight with cups of coffee and a guarded smile. Ramirez kept her informed in plain words when he needed to be absent. He never lied about risk. He used clear language so she could make choices for herself. Finally, the day came when he could say what she needed most. He returned to the penthouse and sat with a file of notes he had kept during the intervening days. He had confirmed names, traced calls, and watched as the trail led away from her. He had spoken to those who could hold people to their word and found that words had been given to him. He found her reading in the living room, legs tucked under her, a scarf around her shoulders. She looked up as he entered. "I think it's done," he said simply. She blinked, not believing. "What do you mean?" He set the file down and met her eyes. "I can't promise there will never be danger. The city keeps secrets. But the men who followed you are moving on. I've arranged it so they have other things to worry about. They won't bother you." Felicia's face changed slowly, like a sun breaking through clouds. Relief came first, then something she had not let herself feel in a long time: hope. Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the book in her lap. "You did this for me," she said, voice small. He nodded. Because you asked me to stay. Because I chose to. Her breath hitched. She found words that had been hard to reach. Thank you. He watched her, waiting to see how much to say next. He wanted to tell her everything, every call he'd made, every step he'd taken. He wanted to hand her proof and let the weight lift fully. Instead, he let the quiet do its work. Rest, he said. We'll take tomorrow as it comes. She looked at him with eyes that had learned to measure truth. The trust between them was fragile and growing. For now, it was enough that she felt safer. For now, it was enough that she could sleep without checking the door. He left the explanation short, but he kept a plan to check again. He wanted to be certain before he offered her the final promise of safety. Ramirez found her sitting on the edge of the guest room bed, her back straight, fingers knotted together like they were holding her upright. He paused in the doorway for a moment, studying her quietly, before stepping inside. Felicia, he said softly. It's over. Completely. The threat has been dealt with. The words hung between them, steady and final. She blinked, almost unsure she'd heard him right. Relief washed through her so quickly it felt like a small shock, followed immediately by a rush of confusion. Her lips parted, but no words came. She wasn't used to good news. Good news always felt temporary, like something that could be snatched away the moment she reached for it. He lowered himself to the seat across from her, elbows resting lightly on his knees. You're safe now, he continued. Truly safe. Her breath shook on the way out. I should feel free, she whispered. I should be happy. Her fingers twisted harder. But I don't know what happens next. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Ramirez nodded slowly, not pushing her, not filling the silence with empty comfort. You've been surviving for so long, he said, that calm feels foreign. It's normal. She lifted her gaze to him, her expression raw. I don't have a home to go back to. Not really. I don't have much of anything to rebuild. I thought leaving all this behind would be the easiest choice in the world. Her throat bobbed. Now I'm not sure. You don't need to decide today. His voice carried gentle authority, firm enough to ground her, soft enough not to overwhelm. Whatever direction you choose, I'll help you step into it. She took a slow breath. What if I stay? Here. In this place. With you. He stilled. Not in shock. He had expected she might consider it, but in something quieter, heavier. If you stay, he said, choosing each word deliberately, I want it to be because it feels right to you. Not because you feel tied to me after all this. She held his eyes. That's not why I'd stay. A silence stretched, warm and fragile. He leaned back slightly, as though bracing himself before speaking. Felicia. I want you here. His voice dropped to something raw. Not because I feel responsible for you. Not because you're safer in these walls. I want you here because I want to keep knowing you. I like how it feels when you're close. I like the quiet we share. He exhaled, dropping his gaze for the first time. I like you. The admission felt like a thread pulling tight in her chest. Her pulse fluttered. 4 days after that conversation, something subtle shifted between them. They didn't rush toward each other. They didn't cling. They simply moved through the house with a new awareness, glances that lasted a second too long, conversations that deepened without warning, shared moments where silence didn't feel empty. 3 weeks passed like that, full of small steps instead of leaps. One evening, she wandered into the gym downstairs, unsure of why she'd gone there except that she knew he spent time in that room when he needed to clear his head. She found him finishing a set, his breath steady but heavy, his shirt clinging to his chest. Ink wrapped around his arms and shoulders, each marking bold yet quiet, like parts of a story told only when someone earned the right to hear it. He noticed her right away and straightened. Couldn't sleep. Not really, she said, stepping closer. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes tracing the patterns on his skin. I've been wondering, every tattoo. Does it mean something? He wiped sweat from his brow with the towel draped around his neck. Most of them do. Can you tell me about one? She asked. Just one. If that's okay. He gave a small, almost shy smirk. Which one? Her hand lifted slightly before she caught herself. She cleared her throat, trying again. The one over your heart. His expression softened instantly. He grabbed the hem of his shirt and lifted it enough to expose the design, lines forming a compass, its center sharp and clean, but the top empty. No north. She stepped closer, drawn in without trying. Why is it missing the top? I got it during a time when I felt like I was moving without direction, he said. Living, working, fighting, but nothing pointed toward anything meaningful. Nothing felt like a real path. Her brows furrowed, sympathy and fascination mixing in her gaze. And now? He let the shirt fall back into place. Now I don't feel as lost. She moved toward him with more confidence than she expected, until there were only inches between them. May I touch it? His jaw flexed, not with tension, but with something like anticipation. You can. Her fingers reached for the fabric, pushing it up just enough to reveal the compass again. She let her fingertips glide over the ink, slow and gentle. His breath caught, barely noticeable, but she felt it. Felt the way his body reacted to the smallest contact. Electricity hummed between them, quiet, steady, undeniable. She traced the missing north point, her touch lingering. You've found some direction now, she murmured. His hand rose hesitantly and rested on her hip, fingers light, barely holding on. I have, he said. You're part of that. Her pulse stumbled. Ramirez. He took one small step closer, giving her every chance to step back. She didn't. Their faces neared until she felt his breath mix with hers. His lips brushed hers once, soft, slow, questioning. Nothing rushed. Nothing forceful. Just a gentle press, like he was asking, "Is this okay?" Her hand slid up his chest, fingers curling into the fabric near his collarbone, and she kissed him back. A tender meeting of lips that felt like the start of something, not the peak of it. When they parted, she opened her eyes to find him looking at her with an honesty that made her knees weaken. "That was," she exhaled shakily. "I wasn't expecting it to feel like that." "Me neither," he admitted, thumb brushing her waist. "It scares me more than anything else has in a long time." A half laugh escaped her. "We're a mess, aren't we?" "Maybe," he said softly. "But we're trying. Together." She leaned her forehead against his, absorbing the warmth of him, the steadiness. His arms wrapped around her carefully, like he wasn't holding a woman, he was holding a choice. A possibility. For the first time in years, she felt her body relax into someone instead of away from them. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I want to stay. Not because I owe you anything. Not because I don't know where else to go. I want to stay because I want more moments like this." His hands tightened just slightly at her waist, the smallest sign of how deeply her words hit him. "Then stay," he murmured. "Stay because it feels right." It did. More than anything she'd known. In that quiet room, no threats, no fear, no pressure. Something new took shape between them. Not duty. Not protection. Something chosen. Something fragile. Something real. A beginning not forced by danger, but born from closeness neither of them expected. A beginning they both wanted. Christmas Eve arrived with a fresh layer of snow covering every rooftop and sidewalk in Chicago. The city looked quieter than usual, as if the cold air itself was holding its breath. Inside the Willis Tower penthouse, soft lights glowed against the wide windows, casting a warm contrast to the frosted world beyond. Felicia stood near the glass, her fingertips resting against the cool surface while her breath fogged the view. She'd woken up with a heaviness in her chest that hadn't faded with coffee or quiet conversation. Christmas used to mean loud laughter, her grandmother's tamales, her mother's off-key singing, and cousins running through the living room. For the first time since she was forced into hiding, she felt the ache for what she once had. What she still loved. What had gone on without her? Ramirez noticed, of course. He always noticed. He didn't push her to talk, didn't crowd her space. But he watched her with a kind of concern that ran deeper than words. "You miss them," he said softly. Felicia nodded, but kept her gaze on the snow-covered streets below. "It's Christmas. I should be with them. I should be in Little Village with my grandmother complaining I don't eat enough." A faint smile pulled at her lips before fading again. "But I can't just show up. I can't bring trouble to their doorstep." Ramirez slipped his hands into his pockets, his expression unreadable. "You won't be bringing trouble. Not today." She frowned, turning toward him. "What do you mean?" He exhaled slowly, like he'd been waiting for the right moment. You can see them. I've already arranged it. Her breath caught. Ramirez, what did you do? I spoke to people who still owe me respect, he said simply. Your family's street is being watched by a team I trust. No one will go near them. There's no threat left, Felicia. But even if there were, you'd be protected. She pressed a hand to her chest. You planned this without telling me. He stepped closer, voice gentle. I wanted it to be a gift. You deserve to see your family without fear. Her eyes filled immediately, tears gathering faster than she could blink them away. She covered her mouth, breath shaking. Thank you. Ramirez didn't touch her, he let her come to him. She walked forward, crossed the space between them, and wrapped her arms around his waist, holding him tight. He held her carefully, almost reverently, his chin resting lightly on her hair. Get dressed, he murmured. Your grandmother is waiting. The ride to Little Village felt like entering another lifetime. Every block held a memory she'd locked away for survival. The bakery on 26th Street, where she bought pan dulce every Sunday, the mural she helped paint as a teenager, the park where she learned to ride a bike. Her breath hitched when they turned down her grandmother's block. Warm lights glowed from the windows of the little brick house. A Christmas wreath hung slightly crooked on the door, the same homemade one they used every year. Smoke drifted from the chimney, carrying the scent of pine and something sweet. Before the car even fully stopped, the front door flew open. Her mother stood there first, hand pressed to her chest, her face breaking into pure relief. Her grandmother came next, her small frame wrapped in a shawl, eyes filling instantly. Two cousins peeked around them, whispering loudly before bursting onto the porch. Felicia stepped out of the car slowly, like any sudden movement might wake her from a dream. Her mother reached her first. Mija, is it really you? Her voice cracked as she crushed Felicia into an embrace so tight it almost hurt. Felicia didn't care. She clung back, sobbing into her mother's shoulder. Her grandmother wrapped her arms around both of them, murmuring blessings in Spanish, tears streaming down her face. Gracias a Dios, gracias a Dios. Her cousins circled her next, their questions coming rapid fire. Where have you been? Are you in trouble? Why didn't you call us? Felicia laughed through her tears. I'm okay now. I promise. I'm okay. She glanced back at the car, where Ramirez stood by the passenger door, hands folded in front of him, watching from a respectful distance. He didn't approach the reunion. He didn't interrupt. He simply watched Felicia come back to life in the arms of the people who loved her before the world fell apart. Inside the house, warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. The kitchen was full of familiar smells, masa, cinnamon, roasted chilies. The radio played Christmas songs in Spanish. Decorations she'd made as a kid still hung around the living room, faded but loved. Her mother cupped her cheeks, studying her. You look tired, baby. You look like you've been carrying too much alone. Felicia closed her eyes, letting her mother's thumb brush tears from her face. I'm not alone anymore. Her grandmother kissed her forehead. Who brought you here, am I Nina? Felicia turned toward the window. Ramirez stood there still, keeping a respectful distance from the front door, snow gathering on his hair and shoulders. A friend, she said softly. Someone who helped me when he didn't have to. Her grandmother followed her gaze, studying the broad man who stood so still, watching with quiet patience. Bring him inside, she whispered. A man who returns a daughter to her mother deserves warmth. Felicia stepped outside. Ramirez, she said gently, come in. Please. He gave a small nod, but didn't move until she reached for his hand. Only then did he follow her into the house. Inside, he stayed near the entryway, greeting her family politely, his deep voice careful and respectful. He didn't try to blend in. He didn't try to be someone he wasn't. But he watched her laugh, watched her talk with her mother, watched her grandmother feed her as if she hadn't eaten in months. He watched her light up with memories and comfort. And he felt something shift inside him. Not the sharp jolt of want. Not the fierce instinct to protect. Something gentler. Something he had never expected to feel. Satisfaction. Quiet, warm, and startlingly deep. Seeing her happy, truly happy, filled him with a fulfillment no victory, no territory, no negotiation had ever given him. This was something entirely different. This was love forming in the quiet spaces. Hours later, when the car pulled away from her family's home, Felicia wiped away a tear with the back of her hand. I didn't think I'd ever see them again, she whispered. I didn't think I'd get to be myself for even one more Christmas. You deserved it, Ramirez said. All of it. She turned toward him. You didn't do it for yourself. No, he agreed softly. Her voice trembled with emotion. Thank you, for giving me back a part of my life. He didn't answer at first. He watched the snow falling in slow flurries, then looked at her. You're giving me back something too, he said. I just didn't realize how much I'd lost. She reached across the seat, her fingers slipping into his. He closed his hand around hers gently, like holding something precious. As the lights of Chicago glowed through the windows, neither of them spoke again. They didn't need to. Everything important was already said. January settled over Chicago with sharp winds and freezing mornings, but inside the Willis Tower penthouse, warmth gathered in quiet moments rather than heat from the vents. Felicia woke each day feeling safer than she ever expected to feel again. What surprised her even more was how natural everything felt, how her life slowly aligned itself with Ramirez's without force or pressure. It happened gently, the shift from the guest room to his bedroom. She stood in the doorway one night, fingers brushing the frame, heart beating too fast. He'd been sitting on the edge of his bed, untying his shoes, when he noticed her. You okay? He asked. She nodded but didn't move. I don't want to sleep alone tonight, she said, her voice soft but steady. Not because I'm scared. Because I want to be close to you. He froze for a moment, like the meaning behind her words needed time to settle. Then he stood, walked toward her, and offered his hand, not demanding, not assuming, just offering. She took it. That first night in his bed wasn't heated or frantic. It wasn't about hunger or fear or trying to fill an empty space. It was about trust. They lay together, her head resting on his chest, his arm around her, their breathing slowly sinking. Nothing rushed. Nothing forced. Their intimacy grew from that same foundation, slow, steady, full of tenderness. He kissed her with care, touched her like she was something he didn't want to break, even though she had already proven her strength countless times. She learned that the man the world feared knew how to be soft when it came to her. And he learned that letting someone close didn't make him weaker. It made him feel seen for the first time in years. He told her one night, his voice low against the dark room, "Letting someone touch me like this, it scares me." She lifted her head from his chest. "Why?" "Because if you ever walk away, I won't recover from it." She touched his cheek, her thumb brushing the edge of his stubble. "I'm not leaving," she whispered. "Not unless you push me out." "I won't," he said. And she believed him. As winter deepened, Felicia started rebuilding the pieces of her life, not the life she had before, but a new one she chose with intention. When she applied for a position at the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, she expected a long waiting period, maybe a rejection. Instead, the curator called her in for an interview within days. Her academic experience, her sharp insights, her gentle but confident communication made an impression. 2 weeks later, she received the offer. Assistant curator. She stared at the email for a long time, her chest tight with disbelief. It wasn't a step backward. It wasn't reclaiming what she'd lost. It was something new, something she chose with her own hands. She ran into the living room, where Ramirez stood near the windows, reviewing reports from his businesses. "Ramirez," she said breathlessly, "I got the job." His head snapped up, eyes brightening in a way she rarely saw. "The museum?" "Yes." He crossed the room and picked her up, lifting her off the ground in a tight embrace. She laughed, holding the back of his neck as he spun her once before setting her down. "I'm proud of you," he said, hands still at her waist. "You did that on your own." She smiled, her eyes shining. "Thank you for believing I could." He brushed a kiss across her forehead. "You were always capable. Now you're finally getting what you deserve." While Felicia built her new career, Ramirez began rethinking his world. Not because she demanded it, but because something inside him shifted as he watched her reclaim her life. He sat in meetings with his lieutenants and found himself questioning decisions he used to approve without hesitation. He studied the businesses he owned, both clean and not, and felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He didn't want Felicia to live in a world where danger shadowed his every move. He didn't want to bring old enemies to her door. He didn't want her to fear what loving him might cost. So he started changing things. He expanded his legitimate enterprises, the construction firms, the restaurants, the real estate developments. He hired consultants to streamline operations and bring full transparency. The underground dealings, the darker tasks, the operations that once brought him power and control, he began to dismantle them piece by piece. The men who relied on those operations resisted at first, but Ramirez's authority was unquestioned. When he said, "We're not doing that anymore," they listened. Felicia never asked for any of it. But she noticed. She noticed the way he came home lighter, the way his shoulders sat lower, the way his focus shifted from survival to purpose. She saw the man, who used to wake up prepared for conflict, now waking up ready for growth. Every morning before she left for work, they shared coffee at the kitchen island. It became their ritual. She would sit on one stool, he on the other, steam rising between them. One morning, she reached across the counter and took his hand. "I love who you are," she told him softly. "But I also love who you're becoming." He squeezed her hand gently. "You're part of the reason I'm becoming anything at all." She shook her head. "No. You're doing this yourself. I'm just here to remind you that you're more than what the world thinks you are." He leaned forward and kissed her palm. "You're helping me grow." "You're helping me too," she replied. "You treat me like I matter, even on days when I don't feel strong." He gave a small smile. "You are strong." She smiled back. "So are you. Not because of your power, but because of your choices." That moment settled between them with quiet truth. Neither of them was trying to fix the other. Neither saw the other as broken. They were simply becoming better, together. Evenings were peaceful in a way neither of them had known before. Sometimes they cooked together, though Ramirez burned toast more often than not. Sometimes they watched documentaries, because Felicia loved learning and Ramirez loved watching her enthusiasm. Sometimes they argued lightly about which art period was most meaningful, only to end up curled against each other on the couch. At night, she slept with her head on his shoulder, her hand over his heart. He held her close, every breath a silent vow he didn't yet know how to put into words. She saw the man he hid from the world. He saw the woman she fought so hard to become. They grew toward each other, not out of need, but out of choice. And in that choice, something new formed, stronger than fear, steadier than uncertainty, warmer than any fire against the winter cold. They were building a life. Not perfect. Not easy. But theirs. 6 months after that night in the quiet church, 6 months of rebuilding, relearning, and rediscovering, they stood together on the skydeck of Willis Tower long before the city was fully awake. The glass beneath their feet revealed the entire stretch of Chicago sleeping under a soft blue haze, its endless grid glowing faintly as dawn inched closer. The wind outside pressed against the windows with a low hum, but inside, the world felt still, suspended, as though the moment had been waiting for them. Ramirez had arranged for the deck to be empty, though he hadn't told her why. Felicia didn't ask. She held his hand and leaned her head lightly on his shoulder, trusting him in a way she once believed she'd never trust anyone again. The early light softened everything around them, the skyline, the horizon, the edges of his normally sharp expression. He looked almost younger, not because of age, but because of the peacefulness that came from loving someone with his whole, unguarded heart. He didn't speak at first. He stood behind her, arms circling her waist, gazing out at the city that had shaped them both in ways neither had asked for. She felt the steady rise and fall of his breathing, the warmth of his chest against her back, and a quiet certainty settled inside her. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was soft, as if anything louder might shatter the intimacy of the morning. "I used to come up here alone," he said. "Years ago. I'd look at this city and feel untouchable. Like everything below me existed because I controlled it. Like I was above everything and everyone." Felicia turned in his hold, her hands resting lightly on his chest. His eyes held none of the old pride he spoke of, only clarity and something close to tenderness. "What do you feel now?" she asked. He brushed a stray curl behind her ear with a slow, careful touch, as though afraid she might vanish if he moved too quickly. "Grateful," he murmured. "Because I'm not alone anymore. And because I finally understand what it means to want something real. Something that doesn't come from fear or force." She lifted her hand to his jaw, thumb tracing the faint shadow of his morning stubble. "You've changed so much, Lorenzo." His breath hitched slightly, not from surprise, but from the weight of hearing his name said with love instead of fear. "You're the reason I even wanted to," he replied. "I've been powerful all my life, but loving you makes me want to be worthy in a way I've never wanted to be worthy of anything." She felt her throat tighten with emotion, the kind that made her chest warm and her eyes sting. Ramirez didn't hide behind his old armor anymore. Every word he spoke came from a place he'd once kept locked away. He stepped back, just enough to reach into the inner pocket of his coat. Her breath caught, not because she expected what he held, but because she sensed the shift in him, the seriousness that radiated through the quiet morning. He opened a small velvet box, and inside was a simple diamond ring, modest compared to the luxury surrounding them, but elegant and perfect. The stone caught the first touch of sunrise, throwing a gentle sparkle across the glass floor. Ramirez took a slow breath, the kind that came from a man who had never begged for anything, but was now ready to offer everything. "I'm not a good man," he began, voice low and steady. "I've done things I can't erase. I've hurt people. I've lived a life that didn't leave room for softness or patience or hope. But you," his voice cracked, just barely. "You taught me I could be more than the world I was born into. You taught me that love doesn't have to be earned through fear, that I don't need to take everything to keep it." Felicia's tears rose instantly, warm and unstoppable. He sank to one knee, not as a show of grandeur, but as a quiet surrender. "I can't promise perfection. I can't promise a spotless life. But I can promise you that every day, I will try to be a man you're proud to wake up beside. A man who protects you without suffocating you, who listens to you, who grows with you. I want to spend my life giving you back every part of yourself that the world tried to take. He looked up at her, eyes filled with a mixture of fear and love and longing. Felicia, will you marry me? Will you let me spend my life loving you back to life, while you continue to shape me into the man I never thought I could become? Her hand flew to her mouth as a sob broke free. She knelt in front of him, cupping his face with both hands, tears falling freely. Lorenzo, you already gave me back my life, she whispered. You gave me safety when I had none. You gave me hope when I didn't remember what it felt like. You made me feel like I was worth loving. She kissed him, soft, trembling, full of emotion she could no longer hold inside. Yes, she breathed against his lips. 1,000 times yes. He closed his eyes with relief, so deep it looked like it reached through years of loneliness. When he slid the ring onto her finger, his hands shook slightly, not from nerves, but from overwhelming joy. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her easily as she laughed through her tears, clinging to him with pure devotion. They stood together, pressed against the glass, looking out over the city that had once swallowed them whole. The skyline stretched endlessly, shimmering as the sun crept higher. The colors shifted from soft pink to gold, washing the buildings in gentle light. This city tried to break both of us, she murmured against his chest. And it still brought us to each other, he replied. She nodded, holding him tighter, feeling the steady beat of his heart under her cheek. We're not fixing our pasts, she said softly. We're choosing our future. He kissed the top of her head, breathing her in. Every day, he promised. For the rest of my life. They stayed like that as the sunrise strengthened, watching the world brighten beneath them. No chaos. No fear. Just the quiet power of two people who had found something worth holding on to. Not perfection. Not redemption written in neon. But love, steady, real, chosen every single day. A new beginning, wrapped in morning light, waiting for them to step into it together. There are certain truths that only reveal themselves after love has had time to settle into the bones, after the rush, after the fear, after two people have chosen each other through both ease and difficulty. For Felicia and Ramirez, those truths unfolded slowly, shaped by their days together, their quiet mornings, and their shared nights where honesty felt less like exposure and more like freedom. Felicia learned first that strength was never about the loudest voice or the hardest exterior. Real strength lived in softness, the kind that allowed someone to be gentle despite what they'd survived. She saw it in the way Ramirez touched her, always giving her space to come closer rather than pulling her by force. She saw it in the way he listened to her, valuing her thoughts as though her mind held the keys to entire worlds. She saw it in the patience he showed when she had difficult moments, when shadows from her past rose without warning. His strength wasn't loud, it was quiet, steady, present. And she came to realize that gentleness was not a weakness, it was courage shaped into kindness. For Ramirez, the revelations were different, but just as powerful. He discovered redemption wasn't some grand, shining finish line. It was a choice made over and over. It was learning to say no to the parts of his empire that thrived on fear. It was choosing honesty instead of intimidation. It was turning his attention toward businesses that built instead of destroyed. He learned that becoming better didn't require perfection, it required willingness. Every day he woke beside her. Every day he saw her smile at him with trust. It reinforced the truth that a man could change if he wanted something pure in his life badly enough. Love demanded vulnerability. It demanded open doors where walls once stood. Felicia had always associated vulnerability with danger. Exposing herself had led to pain before. But with Ramirez, baring her heart didn't feel like setting herself up to be hurt. It felt like sharing her breath with someone who valued every inhale. She told him her fears. She told him the parts of her story she had never dared speak aloud. And when he listened, really listened, she found pieces of herself she thought were gone forever. Ramirez, who had spent years guarding every emotion, learned that vulnerability didn't weaken him. It made him human. It made him whole. It allowed him to love her without limits, and to let her love him in return. Healing, they discovered, wasn't swift or tidy. Some days Felicia felt whole and strong, grounded in her new life. Other days, memories tested her, and she'd freeze at sounds or scenes that triggered old hurts. Ramirez never rushed her. He never demanded she move on. He simply stood with her, steady as a lighthouse, reminding her that healing could be slow and still be real. He had his own healing to do, though he rarely acknowledged it. Years of isolation, forced hardness, and choices fueled by survival rather than morality left marks on his spirit. Felicia noticed them even when he tried to hide them. On nights when he woke in silence, staring at the ceiling, she'd take his hand and hold it until his breathing settled. Healing wasn't only for the wounded in body. It was for anyone trying to rewrite a future different from their past. They were also reminded that help sometimes comes from unexpected corners of life. Felicia never expected a man like Ramirez, feared, respected, untouchable, to become her place of safety. Ramirez never expected a woman from a world so different from his to become his anchor, his compass, his reminder that people could be good even after suffering. In each other, they found answers they didn't know they were seeking. Purpose wove itself through their days quietly. For Felicia, purpose meant building a life of her own making. Her role at the museum fulfilled her, challenged her, and let her stand on her own feet. She loved coming home with stories about exhibits and artists, watching Ramirez lean in, genuinely curious. He loved seeing her excited, loved knowing she had found work that lit her up from within. He too discovered a new kind of purpose, using his influence for something more meaningful than control. He invested in community centers, helped fund art programs, supported shelters. He didn't need applause. He just needed to know he was building rather than destroying. For the first time in his life, he felt light instead of burdened. One of the most beautiful gifts they gave each other was the experience of being truly seen, not for their roles in the world, not for their pasts, not for their mistakes, but for their hearts. Ramirez saw beyond Felicia's silence, beyond her timid beginnings. He saw her intelligence, her resilience, her fire. Felicia saw past his hardened exterior, and into the man who desperately wanted to be good, who carried loneliness like a second skin, who hungered for a love he never believed he deserved. Second chances required courage, and they faced that truth often. There were days when fear whispered that they were too different, too complicated, too damaged. But they chose each other anyway, every morning, every night, every moment that required faith. Their love didn't erase who they used to be, it simply gave them permission to grow beyond it. Ramirez softened without losing his strength. Felicia grew strong without losing her kindness. Together, they shaped each other into people capable of facing a future filled with hope instead of dread. In the end, their story wasn't built on dramatic rescues or flawless perfection. It was built on quiet choices made in the middle of ordinary days, choices to trust, to listen, to apologize, to forgive, to try again. Two wounded souls building something whole. Ramirez used his power differently now. He protected without caging anyone, defended without cruelty, led without fear. Felicia reclaimed every piece of herself that once felt lost. Her voice grew firmer. Her steps grew lighter. Her confidence bloomed in ways she never thought possible. Together, they created a life that didn't erase their scars but honored them. Their love proved that transformation wasn't born from force, but from tenderness. It proved that redemption could come from the most unlikely places. It proved that sometimes the most dangerous choice, opening your heart, was the choice that saved you. On a quiet evening months after their engagement, they stood on their balcony overlooking the city lights. Chicago stretched far into the distance, glowing like a promise. Felicia rested her head against his chest, his arms wrapped tightly around her. "We made it," she whispered. "We're just beginning," he murmured. Their future waited for them not as a perfect fairytale, but as something better, something real. Two people once broken, now building a life shaped by love, courage, and devotion. They had not escaped their pasts, they had outgrown them. And as they held each other beneath the night sky, they stepped fully into their forever, proof that love, when chosen bravely, transforms everything it touches. Thank you, truly, thank you for spending these moments with me. Every time you watch, every time you listen, every time you allow these characters to touch your heart, you give life to this channel. Your support is the reason these stories continue to breathe. We're on a journey together, one built on love, heartbreak, healing, and resilience. And now, we're reaching for a new milestone, 10,000 subscribers. It's a big dream, but it's a dream we can reach together. If you've been enjoying these stories, if you've ever felt seen, moved, comforted, or inspired by them, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. Your subscription isn't just a number, it's a message that these stories matter, that this little storytelling family is growing, and that we're building something beautiful here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. And thank you for being part of this journey. Let's reach 10,000, side by side.